the playfulness of Jesus after the resurrection. Let's talk about it. Easy to see that Jesus after his resurrection is different than he was before his resurrection. I mean, just to contrast his prayer, for example, in the Garden of Eden when he's bleeding drops of blood because of the distress of what he is about to suffer, the great seriousness with which he is approaching these things that God the Father has given him to do. But there is a change after the resurrection. Now, first of all, Jesus, the way he is with his disciples is very different. He's not permanently there. He'll appear and then he'll disappear. He'll be there and then he'll be gone. He'll walk with them and then poof, he's suddenly nowhere to be seen. He comes through empty doors, and this is all quite amazing how Jesus, as resurrected and beyond the reach of sin and death, is interacting with his disciples. But there's something else to the way that Jesus acts after the resurrection that I've always been very interested in, and it is, I don't have a better word for it. It just seems to me like there's a playfulness with which Jesus is interacting with his disciples, and that playfulness comes into stark contrast with the seriousness and the fear and the worry that his disciples have. So, for example, the best one occasion to think about is the road to Emmaus. It's on Easter when Jesus appears to the two disciples on the road to Emmaus, and he walks with them, but he hides himself. He's playing hide and go seek with them, and he hides himself so that they don't recognize his face, so that he can speak to them. And he takes them through Moses and all of the prophets and shows them all the things that had to take place, all the sufferings that the Messiah had to go through before he entered into his glory. And then it says he pretended like he would keep going when they got to Emmaus, but they compel him to come in. And so Jesus goes into the room and they're having dinner, and he takes the bread and he breaks it. And it says they recognized him in the breaking of the bread, and then poof, Jesus is gone. Now look at, he plays hide and go seek with them. He pretends like he would keep going. He shows himself in the breaking of the bread, and then he disappears. I want it to be said with all piety, with all respect, but there is a lightness, a light touch with which Jesus is dealing with his disciples. We see it again even when Jesus appears the next week, and the 11 are gathered together. Thomas wasn't there the first time, and so now Thomas is there. And then Jesus says to him, "Look, hold on to my hands. Throw your hand into my side." It's like Jesus is a child is showing off his scars that he has. Look at this wound. You're not going to believe my hands. Look at these holes in my hands. Or when Jesus then appears to the disciples on the Sea of Galilee, and they're out there fishing, and he says, "Have you caught anything?" "No," they say. "Whenever you're around, we never catch anything." They don't know it's Jesus though. So he says, "Put the net on the other side," like he did before in Luke chapter 4 when he called the disciples, and they throw the net on the other side, and they haul in all these fish. They count them. John counts all the fish that are there, and John says it's Jesus, and so Peter puts on his cloak and he jumps in, and he comes to the shore, and there Jesus has already cooking over a charcoal fire fish. Now, why is it that Jesus has him haul in these 200 and some odd fish when he's already got it there? It's almost like he's playing around with them. I think this playfulness of Jesus after the resurrection, especially as it contrasts to the worry and the distress of the disciples, shows how it is that Jesus is now, in the resurrection, beyond the reach of sin, beyond the reach of the devil, beyond the grasp of suffering. These things cannot get to him. And so Jesus is simply free to move around, to rejoice, to laugh, to bless, to breathe on the disciples, and to wish them his peace. This is the joy of the resurrection. And it's what's in store for us. I mean, we have this danger of thinking that if something is serious, then we have to treat it without a joyfulness, or even, in fact, we think one of the ways that we show our seriousness about something is by being angry about it. I mean, the angrier we are about the truth of the gospel, or the angrier we are about our politics, that shows that we're serious and we really mean it. But Jesus now is beyond the grasp of death, and his lightness, his joy, his gladness infuses everything that he does and he says, and he gives that to us. so that when Jesus comes to us after the resurrection, he says peace to us, and he delivers joy to us. And in fact, he delivers a sort of happiness to us, because we know that when we belong to Jesus, that the grave can't claim us as its own either, that we will be raised, that Jesus will have us in the resurrection, that we will dwell forever in eternal joy and gladness. So I hope that this Easter season we can rejoice in the playfulness of Jesus, and that we can also be somewhat playful, even as we grasp with these serious things of truth, of life, and of death, that we know that Jesus has overcome death and the grave, that he forgives our sins, and that he will have us in eternity. My expert YouTube advisor, Daniel, said, "Dad, your videos would be better if you had a better background." So, do you think Luther should look over my shoulder like this? Is that what you're talking about, Daniel? Luther can say, "You guys should subscribe. Daniel will be so happy." That's what Luther sounds like.